This video is not intended for children.
Hello everyone. Our topic today was requested by John Ratsey, Jonathan Harris, Josh Hopkins, Rakatoon210, and Ninjammer726. We'll be going over Kratos from the God of War franchise. And as Kratos is the protagonist of all of those games, massive spoilers ahead for the God of War series.
Okay, so the God of War series takes place primarily in mythic Greece, with 7 of the 9 games, yeah, who knew there were so many, detailing Kratos' exploits in his homeland, and the last 2 evidently taking place in mythical Norway, where Kratos starts dealing with the Norse gods instead of Greek gods. Before we go any further, we cannot stress enough how very loosely the God of War series follows both the Greek and Nordic myths. Alright, with that said, let's proceed. Kratos was born a Spartan, along with his younger brother Deimos, and while Kratos would not learn of this until decades later, he is a demigod, son of the Greek god Zeus, and a mortal woman, because as anyone who's ever so much as glanced at Greco-Roman mythology knows, Zeus can't keep it in his pants. The young Spartan spent the first few years of his life training alongside his brother to become a Spartan soldier. However, at some point Zeus was told the prophecy of the Marked Warrior, an unnamed mortal progeny of Zeus himself, who would, at some future date, slay not only Zeus, but bring down the entirety of the Olympian pantheon and destroy the city of Olympus as well. Rather than keep it in his pants and ensure that no such child would ever be born, Zeus sent the 2 gods of war, Athena and Ares, to search for this mortal. And they believed they had found him when they discovered Kratos' brother, Deimos. Deimos was born with a distinctive birthmark, and for this reason, the gods believed him to be the prophesied Marked Warrior, and descended upon the mortal's home, abducting Deimos. Kratos actually attacked Ares to try and save his brother, but predictably, the God of War left this off and slapped Kratos away like the gnat he might as well have been at the time, earning Kratos the scar across his eye, which he would sport for the rest of his days. Similarly, in remembrance of both the brother he could not save and the oath to never fail in such a way again, Kratos had tattoos done in an exact likeness of Deimos' birthmarks, giving him the distinctive appearance most of us are familiar with.
As he grew, Kratos did indeed become a Spartan soldier. He also married and had a daughter. Shortly after his daughter's birth, however, she grew ill, and the illness threatened her life in more ways than one, as Spartan tradition demanded that weak children be cast aside and left to die. Ignoring this, Kratos set off in search of the mythical ambrosia, having heard that it could cure his daughter of her ailment, thus removing the societal pressure to let his daughter die. Despite Spartan tradition, Kratos also somehow managed to bring several soldiers under his command along on the quest. Unfortunately for everyone involved, Greek gods being Greek gods, many of the gods had made a wager, selecting unknowing mortal champions, giving them a reason to search for the ambrosia all at the same time, and thus pitting them against each other to see whose champion would prove successful. Ares had chosen Kratos as his champion, sickening his daughter as motivation to send Kratos after the ambrosia. Despite the opposition facing he and his soldiers, as well as the occasional deific tantrum when one of the other champions was defeated, Kratos did indeed recover the ambrosia and return home to see his daughter recover to full health. However, in the process, all of his soldiers died, and Kratos made a mortal enemy of Ulrich, Hades' champion, who would return a couple more times to cause Kratos problems in the future.
As time passed, Kratos grew into a mighty Spartan general, and despite his wife's protests, spent most of his time away from home, campaigning for the glory of both Sparta and his own name. One such campaign put him once again on the wrong side of Ulrich's wrath. But this time, the mighty barbarian, now a king thanks to the death of his father, Ulrich's reason for seeking the ambrosia, broke Kratos' army. In a last-ditch effort, Kratos pled directly to Ares for aid, swearing that if Ares delivered Kratos from his enemies, the Spartan general would pledge his life to Ares' service. Ares took the deal, gifting Kratos with the Blades of Chaos and searing the chains with which the blades were wielded directly into his flesh, bonded forever as a reminder of Kratos' own eternal bond to Ares. Ulrich was slain and his army defeated. Afterward, Kratos ravaged the land, foe and innocent alike, in Ares' service, as the god of war wished to spread chaos and destruction, and subsequently his name and influence across the land. Obligatory fuck.
Ares had grand plans for Kratos. Zeus, as king of the gods, had decreed that no god could directly move against another, and Ares schemed for the throne of Olympus. He couldn't move personally against any of the other gods, especially Zeus, without drawing the ire of the entire pantheon, but he could raise up a mortal with the skills and tools to do so in his stead, stepping in only if the other gods did the same. His choice for this ultimate soldier was Kratos. By sending the mortal on these bloody missions, Ares hoped to elevate Kratos to the highest echelon of warrior, but believed that to do that, Kratos would have to cut ties with all attachments to mortals and the mortal world, including his family. To that end, Ares directed Kratos to attack a seemingly random town. Unbeknownst to Kratos, Ares also ensured that Kratos' wife and child would be in the town when it was struck. In a bloody frenzy, Kratos and his Spartans descended upon the town, and despite the warnings of an old oracle, who was left alone because oracle, I guess, Kratos butchered everyone in his path. Only after his bloody fugue subsided did Kratos realize that he had slain his wife and child with his own two hands while they'd begged and pleaded for him to stop. As he despaired over this turn of events, the old oracle cursed him, literally binding the ashes of Kratos' slain family to his skin to wear forever as a mark of his sins. It's worth noting that Kratos is, unsurprisingly, the marked warrior of the legend, and any or all of his tattoos, the ashes, or the scar on his face mark him as such. For some reason, Ares believed that this death would free Kratos from the shackles of his attachment to mortal life. Much more predictably, Kratos cursed Ares' name for his heinous betrayal and refused to act as Ares' champion thereafter. Because duh.
For Kratos' refusal to uphold his oath to Ares, the ghost of Sparta, as he would come to be known now that he looked either albino or literally ashen, depending upon the game you're playing, drew the attention of the Furies, a trio of deific beings who originally existed only to be sure that such blood oaths were upheld, but who more recently had sided with Ares in his secret plot to overthrow Olympus. They clouded Kratos' memories, seeking to lull him into a state such that he would forget the fate of his family and once more faithfully serve as Ares' champion. Kratos received aid in combating these visions from the Oathkeeper, the literal keeper of the very oaths that the Furies policed. Son of the Furies, the Oathkeeper had always served them faithfully, but by his nature he knew the intimate details of every oath to which he was bound. And thanks to the trickery, deceit, and betrayal levied upon Kratos, the Oathkeeper found himself, for the very first time, questioning whether or not the Furies and Ares were in the right. Thus, Kratos, with the Oathkeeper's help, battled through illusions, false visions, and real dangers until he'd slain all three of the Furies in the quest to free himself from the clouds around his mind, until only the Oathkeeper was left. At which point, Kratos was informed that the Oathkeeper himself would have to die in order for Kratos' bond to Ares to be broken. It's worth noting that Kratos kills literally hundreds, possibly thousands of beings over the course of his career. In all of that time, the Oathkeeper is one of literally only a handful of people that Kratos has ever shown remorse or hesitation about murdering. We're talking like 4, maybe 5 total over the course of all 9 games. The Oathkeeper gave his life gladly, as not only did it free Kratos from what the Keeper considered an unjust burden, the Oathkeeper had been shown a vision of the god of war destroying Olympus, and believed Kratos was the one to stop Ares. It is worth noting that despite the vision explicitly showing Ares doing the deed, Kratos himself both becomes a god of war and destroys Olympus later. So like every other prophecy in this series, it's possible that this one was of the self-fulfilling variety. With Kratos' bond broken, the Furies' hold on his mind vanishes, and the memory of slaughtering his family returns to him.
Which really wrecked Kratos' next decade or so, as he spent an indeterminate period of time doing everything he could to forget the pain of the very memories the Oathkeeper had restored to him, before he finally made a deal with the Greek pantheon as a whole. He would serve as Olympus's champion, and in return, he would be forgiven for the sins he'd committed, most notably the slaughter of his family. Keep in mind that Kratos is still clueless at this point as to all of the references made to his prophetic destruction of these people. The only plans for the gods he knows about are that Ares wanted him to be his weapon against the gods, and he hates Ares, so working against Ares and helping the rest of them isn't a problem for him at all. For roughly 10 years, Kratos did just that, running one blood-soaked errand for the gods after another. During that period of service, he actually saved the entire Pantheon and the world, and got screwed over in the process. Persephone, Hades' wife and thus queen of the underworld, was fed up with her situation, and unable or unwilling to think of another solution, hatched a plot to destroy literally the entire world. The mortal world, the underworld, and Olympus included. Because doing so would finally free her from having to deal with mortals, who she found pathetic, and grant her vengeance against the gods who allowed her to be abducted by Hades, and then subsequently forced her to marry him. All in one fell swoop. She freed the Titan Atlas from imprisonment, and knocked Helios, god of the sun, from the sky, imprisoning him and giving him to Atlas. Helios' absence meant that the god of dreams was allowed to hold sway over the mortal world, gods included, leaving Persephone free from interference to her plan, which was to combine Atlas's considerable strength with Helios' power to destroy the pillar that upheld the world. With the pillar destroyed, everything would collapse into the underworld, and everything, even the dead in Hades, hell, and the Elysian fields, heaven, would be destroyed. Persephone and the other gods included.
Kratos braved many dangers to stop all of this from happening, but the grand irony is that if Persephone had just had 2 brain cells to rub together, she probably would have gotten away with it. Kratos didn't originally know the full extent of Persephone's plans, or even that she was involved. He came to the underworld tracking Helios, so that the sun god could be restored to the sky and allow the rest of the world to awaken. Once in the underworld, Kratos encountered his daughter, who he learned was living peacefully in the Elysian fields. When he demanded that Persephone allow him to see his daughter, she cleverly, and probably truthfully, told him that he must be cleansed of all of his evil and sins to enter the Elysian fields, just like everyone else. Kratos was ominously told that this could be arranged, but that the world may suffer because of his selfishness. Kratos, whose 2 defining characteristics for most of his life were that he was A, a dick, and B, always angry, did not care. So the goddess showed him how to cleanse his evil from his soul. However, in doing so, it washed away all of the power he'd gained by living such a horrendous, murderous life.
Uncaring, Kratos went to join his daughter in Greco heaven, and the two had a joyful reunion. Every indication is that Kratos would have happily and unknowingly spent the rest of the world's brief time left there with his daughter, if Persephone hadn't opened her idiot fricking mouth. At this point, just to rub in the fact that most humans were idiotically selfish just as Kratos had proven himself to be, Persephone outlined her dastardly plans, which spelled death for Kratos' daughter. He didn't care about the world. Again, he's a huge jerk, which honestly he only ever kinda gets over, at best. But if he did nothing, his daughter would die. Again. And it would be his fault. Again. So Kratos stood up to Persephone. He couldn't leave the Elysian fields and regain his evil power, so instead he started murdering the souls of the heaven-bound dead to recoup his evil points until he was his old self again. He then kicked Persephone's teeth in, but not in time to save the World Pillar, so instead, the Titan Atlas was forced to spend eternity holding up the world, and Helios was returned to the sky. Everyone woke up, and life proceeded as normal. But Kratos was under the impression he was now somehow more barred from the Elysian fields than he'd been before, which had to be okay, because it meant his daughter could live in paradise forever. Yay.
So, a few years down the line, and Kratos has been doing this whole champion of the gods thing for a decade, and it's getting old. But wait, there's more. Athena has one last task for Kratos to perform, and then he'll be forgiven of all of his sins. Ares has been successfully getting the rest of the gods' panties in a twist this whole time, and Athena has finally had enough of it. And by tacit extension, so have the rest of the gods. Ares has laid siege to Athens, which, for those of you who aren't aware, is named after Athena. So she wants Kratos to break the siege, and while he's at it, break Ares himself. So Kratos heads out, and is informed along the way that the only way for a mortal to harm a god is with the power of Pandora's box, which is located in a death trap-filled dungeon on top of a titan roaming the desert. Long story short, Kratos gets there, only to be killed by Ares, followed by an escape from Hades with the help of Zeus, before Kratos opens Pandora's box, gaining the power to kill Ares, and does so with great prejudice. Afterwards, he goes to Athena, and is informed that his sins have been forgiven, but that no one gets to forget them. In response, Kratos goes to commit suicide, but literally can't because Athena tells him not to be so hasty and instills him as a new god of war in Ares' place.
Once so installed, Kratos goes on a series of small adventures. First, he returns to the ambrosia tree he visited years prior and destroys it, as loyal followers of Ares hoped to use it to return the former god of war back to life. Second, he discovered that his mother had been hidden and possibly cursed by Poseidon in Atlantis, and that his brother Deimos had been imprisoned and tortured in the underworld. Forced to kill his mother, thanks to the curse, Kratos sinks Atlantis, both in response for forcing him to murder his mom and in order to empower himself, then goes and finds his brother, who, it turns out, blames Kratos for leaving him down there for all those years. Thankfully for familial relations, they are attacked by Deimos' jailer, and the two brothers reconcile and join forces for the first and last time, with the jailer god killing Deimos and Kratos killing said god in return. Kratos buries his last remaining family as his rage and disgust for the gods grows ever deeper, since he'd learned it was Ares and Athena who had kidnapped Deimos at Zeus' behest, and Poseidon had obviously held his mother prisoner, and possibly cursed her. And as time went on, Kratos' relations with the other gods, only ever okay to start with, began to sour more and more. Kratos spent much of his time commanding the legions of Sparta, aiding them directly with his deific power in the conquest of Greece, much to the annoyance of the other gods as he was encroaching upon their territories. At some point, Athena came to Kratos and warned him that if he continued to flagrantly disregard the other god's territory, she wouldn't be able to protect him. Kratos' response, and you can safely assume this is always his response to anyone's advice in the future, ever, was to ignore her.
Turned out that Athena's warning was something of a last chance, as when Kratos immediately, we're talking, finished the conversation and then dropped down to Earth to help the Spartans conquer yet another city, Zeus appeared and tricked Kratos into pouring all of his godly might into the blade of Olympus, and subsequently killed Kratos with it when Kratos refused to bend to Zeus's will. As Kratos floated down to the underworld, the Titan Gaia, an enemy to the gods, resurrected him, allowing him to physically claw his way back up from the depths of Hades. From that point on, the two worked together as Kratos was enraged that the gods had screwed him over yet again, and decided it was time for Zeus, specifically, to die. Self-fulfilling prophecy, anyone? Kratos then went on a long journey to meet the Fates so that he could change his own, since they deemed it was not his destiny to slay Zeus. In typical Kratos fashion, he stabbed what he disagreed with and ended up killing all three of the Fates, and using his own strand of fate, took himself back to the moment he died, surprising Zeus from behind the moment after he had stabbed Kratos to death, and using the Blade of Olympus still infused with his former godly might, Kratos beat the ever-living crap out of Zeus. Before the killing blow could be struck, however, Athena intervened, attempting to reason with Kratos, because that's ever worked. Kratos, of course, ignored her and went for Zeus again, only to have Hera take the blow and die instead. As Zeus fled, Athena revealed that she tried to stop Kratos for two reasons. First, because no child should ever kill their own father. This is the first time we're made aware of Kratos as a demigod. And second, because she knew that every god on Olympus would fight to protect Zeus, which meant if Kratos wanted Zeus dead, all of Olympus would probably have to fall, which she of course did not want. Kratos was unmoved by this revelation, and though he hadn't wanted Athena dead, since she was essentially the only god that hadn't screwed him in some way or another, he proceeded with his plan to kill Zeus. But since Zeus had the other gods on his side, Kratos used the power of the Fates to travel back in time and bring all of the Titans, from the moment they died, to the present to help him sate his vengeance. Literally riding the Titans into battle with the gods, Kratos then proceeded to slay every god that stood in his way. Poseidon, Helios, Hermes, the list goes on. Suffering betrayals by the Titans and a visitation by the ghost of Athena along the way. Oddly, Athena is the only other god who plays the come back to life card that Kratos likes to play continually. Claiming to have ascended to some kind of higher plane, and informing Kratos that if he wants to kill Zeus, he'd need the flames of Olympus, and vaguely hand-waving her reasons for changing her stance on Zeus's livelihood post-death. She later clarifies that Pandora's box was now held within the flames, and that hope, the most powerful weapon in the world, still remained locked in the box, though all the evils had been released. Over the course of the game, Kratos finds and accidentally befriends Pandora, who is the key to the flames and therefore the box, since the flames would destroy any man or god that touched them. Pandora would still be destroyed, but the flames would then be quenched. Ultimately, Kratos, in a rare show of humanity, decides there must be a better way to get his revenge. But Pandora, who was literally forged as the key to the box in the flames, was determined to open it for him, since it was her purpose and she wanted revenge on Zeus for beating and crippling Hephaestus, god of the forge, who she viewed as a father figure. She died opening the box, and, to Kratos' shame, there was nothing inside.
With just Zeus left, Kratos took the Blade of Olympus and proceeded to do battle with the King of the Gods, defeating him before a shade of Zeus, fueled by the power of fear, as in the source of fear from within Pandora's box, appeared and began to drown Kratos in fear, shame, and self-loathing for all of his misdeeds. In a surprisingly deep and touching moment, considering the overall tone of these games, he was guided by the spirit or memory of Pandora to find forgiveness within himself, rather than from others for everything he'd done. Once Kratos had done so, Pandora reminded him of the power of hope, something he'd once scoffed at, and Kratos broke the fear/Zeus creature's grip on him before, literally empowered by the flames of hope, beating Zeus to death in truth. Afterward, Athena appeared, commending Kratos on a job well done, and only then realizing the truth of what had happened. When Pandora's box was opened, way back in God of War 1, Athena had believed that all of the evils of the box had been absorbed into Kratos. I mean, come on, look at the guy. But instead, the gods had been affected by the evils, as evidenced by most of the gods releasing some sort of calamitous force into the world upon their deaths. With all of the gods dead, the world was in ruins, flooded, souls wandering loose, pestilences and plagues set free, etc.
But what no one had realized was that Pandora's box was empty because hope had flowed into Kratos. Kratos himself had been so consumed with anger, hatred, feelings of betrayal, and self-loathing that even he hadn't noticed, and all of those same emotions had concealed the power of hope's presence from anyone else's senses. Athena, realizing all of this, demanded that Kratos give her the power of hope so that she could lead humanity to a better place after all of this destruction. But Kratos instead impaled himself with the Blade of Olympus, freeing the power of hope, much like the evils, into the world for everyone. Athena was enraged, and her reaction has led many of the fanbase to assume she was somehow infected with the evil of greed. But there was a lot of unanswered questions about that. Regardless, Athena leaves Kratos for dead and vanishes.
Kratos somehow lives and eventually finds his way to Norway, where he meets Faye. The two eventually marry and have a child, Atreus. Unbeknownst to Kratos, Faye was in fact a giant, and one of some renown. She clearly had access to magic, as will be evidenced shortly, and while she's never seen in the game, we can only presume that she magically shrank herself, or something, because even on his dumbest day, Kratos would have noticed he married a giant. Faye, however, was aware of Kratos' past and presumably both accepted and loved him regardless. Kratos spent much of Atreus' young life on expeditions to learn to control his all-consuming rage, so once again, he wasn't really around to play the good parent. But at least this time, something good came out of it, I guess. At some point, shortly before the game begins, for unspecified reasons, Faye dies, leaving her husband and son with a last request: that her ashes be scattered from the highest mountain in all the realms. She also leaves some specific instructions on how to complete said request. While originally Kratos decided his son Atreus is not up to the journey, the Norse god Balder appeared, fights Kratos, and changes Kratos' mind since the location of their home had now been compromised. So, the father and son duo set off on a journey to scatter Faye's ashes according to her last wishes.
They travel several of the realms of Norse mythology on the journey, learning that the highest mountain in the land is in fact a peak in the land of the giants, Faye's homeland. What a surprise. Battling monsters, elves, trolls, and Norse gods along the way, but the story is mostly about a father and son who don't know each other very well, growing closer. By the end of the journey, they learn many new things about Faye. First, that she was once known as Laufey the Just, a giant hero who fought for the weak, and did good where she could. Basically, she was everything Kratos was not. Kratos had known she was gifted in combat, likely part of what drew the two together, but not about her history. It was also revealed that among Faye's other mystical abilities was the ability to see the future. She had seen the trek that her husband and son would make to spread her ashes, and so she had walked the path before them, leaving gold-painted markers along the way to guide them. She had also mystically warded their home from sight while she was alive, and part of her instructions upon death were specifically to use some of the trees that made the warding as firewood to render her into ashes, breaking the ward, which she knew would draw the Norse gods, of whom she'd made enemies, to their door, jump-starting the journey that may otherwise not have happened. Lastly, we learned that Faye had wanted to name their son Loki, but Kratos had insisted on a different name. And, by the game's end, Kratos had made an enemy of at least a few of the Norse gods, and his son Atreus had proven both competent in battle and rather intelligent. Who knows where the next game will go?
And that's basically Kratos, the god of war from said gaming franchise. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and maybe share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for more videos you'd like to see us do in the future, do like John Ratsey, Jonathan Harris, Josh Hopkins, Rakatoon210, and Ninjammer726, and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore, let's play, or other, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, hit that subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, click the link on the left.
Thank you to all of our patrons for making these videos possible.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.